Thank you indeed, Katie. And turning back to the opposition, we have our second student speaker for the night, Samuel Spiri. Sam is a third-year history student at Clare College and the chair of the University Conservatisation this Michaelmas. He won the right to speak through open audition. Sam, you have the ears of the house.
Good evening. Tonight I'm going to start by setting out some parameters which I think are very important to this debate. I'll then rebut Emily Thornberry, and then I'll rebut Katie's arguments tonight. I have shared in much of the House's disappointment over the last few years. Boris Johnson's rule-breaking, Liz Truss's idiocy. They were two pills that were very hard for me to swallow. But this government's different. Rishi doesn't have the distorted economic world vision of Liz Truss, and he holds himself to far higher ethical standards than Boris Johnson. Mr Sunak's top ministers, in Oliver Dowden and Jeremy Quinn, both of whom are due to appear at the Conservative Association this year, are a far cry from the calls to close the circle around the Pritzker. I say this not to remove agency from the current government, quite the opposite. It's important in this case that the government's actions or inactions are considered in their own context. In the same way that this House would not allow the government to claim the benefit of policies years old that they had no hand in initiating, this House must not prematurely condemn the government for the actions of its predecessors. To start off, in response to Ms Thornberry, let's look at the targets the government set for itself. Halving inflation, growing the economy, shrinking NHS waiting lists and reforming our immigration system. Well, is the government actually meeting them? Let's have a look. Inflation at 10.1% in January. It's currently sat at 6.1% now. I don't know if Ms Thornberry calls that governing. Projected by the OECD to average out at 2.8% in 24. I don't know if Ms Thornberry calls that governing. More conservative estimates by the Bank of England forecast 5% inflation in January 24, meeting the government's target, and a 2% inflationary average during 25. On growing the economy, the ICAEW report, which I'm sure you've all read, the growth comparisons, the UK's economy is growing the fastest of any G7 nation. Both the Office for National Statistics and the OBS say we're growing faster than many other countries where we weren't previously. Moreover, according to the June 23 NHS statistics book, the following all true. 23% reduction in the number of patients spending 4 or more hours waiting in A&E. 12%, let me get to the end and then I'll take yours. 12-hour waits have fallen by almost half. Ambulance call times for the highest emergency priority calls have fallen by 30%. Second priority call wait times have fallen by over an hour or by half. Who was that? Go.
Do you not think it's out of context to compare waiting times?
That's exactly what I'm going to say next. This is exactly what I'm going to say next. Please do not think me disingenuous. I'm not making the case that the government is perfect. That's not my intention. That would simply be a lie. I only intend to highlight the areas in which the government is meeting policy with performance, because the trajectory of the government is actually positive on the issues it takes up. That might not be the issues you want, but it's positive on some issues. That is governing. But Sam, you might cry, the UK's not shored up its aquatic border. Despite the fact the government has passed the legislation it promised and reduced small boats by 20%, let's call a spade and say that it's not solved the problem. The government knows this, of course. 2 headline speeches from Ms Braverman in the last fortnight. But we keep being told by journalists and the Labour Party, well, she evidently doesn't have a clue what she's doing. How then could the Conservatives, or even Labour for that matter, solve this problem? There doesn't seem to be an alternative vision in the media. Well, we all know that controlled migration is optimal. We all know that if we had less illegal economic migration pressure, we'd be able to take more asylum seekers.
I'm just wondering, do you think appointing a woman who calls migrants as part of a great hurricane is an example of the modern, transparent government that you're claiming is so different from its predecessors?
Here's the problem. Here's the problem, Sammy. We've got a Home Secretary who's having to defend herself at the moment by invoking her parents because she's being accused of betraying her heritage by putting blocks on illegal immigration. Once you let emotion back into politics, you get back to where we are, no thank you, we get back to where we were with Corbyn Johnson, with the British people being forced to choose between who they disliked least. I know you're all intelligent and recognise that illegal economic migration undermines the labour value of legal economic migrants, hurting those who migrate legally. You all know that at the core of it, this is the government's position. The only disagreement is what quantity of migrants the UK should and can take. The members of the proposition actually know that too, but they'll ignore it while it's politically expedient. Much like immigration, contrary to what's being said in the press, the policy platform is actually quite a good one. Being international advocates for the Ukraine, banning excessively dangerous dogs. I have, and I will say this honestly, I have serious reservations about the smoking ban, but I do understand why stopping big tobacco from getting children hooked on colourful flavoured battery acid is a policy that the government might want to take on. Striking generous but affordable concessions to the unions on a consistent basis, even though they might not be what the unions demand, and actually conducting a cost-benefit analysis of spiralling multi-billion pound projects like HS2. Ask yourself this. This is the question. Is the kind of government that distributes its resources, very limited resources, through cost analysis, really not the kind of government that you want? Labour, so far, and this, now I'm going to move on to what you said, Katie, not now, Joe, hasn't really made a case for what it wants to do in government. The things it has said, £28 billion for green projects, that's not been mentioned today. Sounds good. Completely uncosted. 6,500 new teachers. Sounds great. Completely uncosted. Zero carbon energy by 2030. Not even just net zero, by the way. No carbon energy. Not carbon offset, which is the 2050 plan, and why we fit into the 2051 Rosebank. Completely uncosted. In fact, Labour's budgeting promises so far have been another windfall tax and to end non-domicile status, as Katie mentioned, both of which raise 8 and 3 billion respectively, far short of the promises, spending increases they've already promised. But the problem with those taxes doesn't stop there. Windfall taxes cannot be done twice. When done twice, it becomes obvious that the UK is not really open for business. It's not serious. Investors go elsewhere. But more importantly, non-domicile status is one of the best parts of the UK's tax code. It allows foreign entrepreneurs to bring a portion of their wealth into the UK and invest without being taxed on their worldwide income. Income that governments are already taxing. If we took away that status, we force them to risk being double taxed. Now, people who are eligible for non-dom status are foreign nationals. Unlike corporations, the middle classes, companies like energy infrastructure companies in the UK, these people are very mobile. If you remove non-domicile status, but keep our tax code substantially similar, so you do it as a headline policy, which is what the Labour Party is promising, you will create a brain drain and a drain of investment from individuals. So not only will your 3 billion that you're going to raise from the tax erode very, very fast, you'll also erode your initial tax base. In comparison, Rishi Sunak's fully costed infrastructure promises, although for some reason you might not believe them, represent ambitious and overdue investment. Hundreds of Northern Rail and Transport projects. I'll spare you the full list because I'm sure you've heard it, but £12 billion for the Manchester to Liverpool line is desperately overdue. Keeping the £2 bus fare, excellent policy. And finally, by the way, making the most of the UK's green coastal energy opportunities. We have the most in the world capacity for green energy along our coastlines. We've known about this for 40 years. Not a single government has done a thing to sort that out. Do you really think that the sole culpability for that sits on Rishi Sunak's head, who's been in office for 12 months? It almost sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? Well, it's not, because it's real and it's what they're promising, and it is a governing direction. So although Labour is incapable of providing you with any policy costings, I'll tell you what I'd do with that extra 6 billion, fully costed. The government could spend £5 billion on the Oxford-Cambridge-King Charles East-West line that they've been thinking about for so long, match Labour on their spending pledge of £365 million for breakfasts, and then, with the remaining £630 million, build 180 3.5 megawatt wind turbines at £3.5 million apiece. That's economic management. That might be what I'd do. Time will only tell what the government will do with the extra 6 billion. But more than any conversation around changing the HS2 scope, which we can all disagree on if we like, and despite all of your complaints, which are actually founded in some real vision, the Labour Party won't promise to overturn it. So why are you voting for no confidence? What do you want? Do you want HS2 back? Keir Starmer said today he won't do it. So, the more concerning thing, even more concerning than that, the thing that should really worry you, is if I, on the back of a napkin, as a university student, can cost 6 billion of spending, like that, done, why is it that the Labour Party can't? Well, they can. Why is it that Labour Party haven't? Well, they have. So why don't you know about it? Because they don't want to tell you. Regardless of how you will vote in a moment when you walk out those doors, there will be a general election next year. A vote of no confidence now is only bringing that forward. I'm not asking you to vote Conservative then. I'm actually not asking you to vote Conservative now. I'm asking you, And it's quite simple: to let our economic recovery continue without the political instability of a snap election. I'm asking you to watch the government, which is quite inert, even though you might not like its smoking bans, make the long-term decisions it feels right, and then judge them in due course, rather than fight a rose garden election now on he said, she said, I'm Romeo, you're Juliet, let's kill each other and nothing good can get done. I'm pointing out that contrary to tribal red-blue nonsense, this government has accomplished, or is on track to accomplish, what it set out in January. I'm saying the government's policy platform is overall moderate, and most importantly, in lieu of all of that, to win your vote tonight, the proposition needed and needs to provide more of a vision for Britain than a government and policy lucky dip emblazoned with the words, not the blue Tories, we wear red instead. I urge you to vote with the opposition.